welcome to the first episode of The People's Questions. Here I will answer any questions you have for me, and we'll try to answer them the best I can. First question comes from a good friend of mine named Smooth Ace, and he wants to know, do I plan on seeing The Amazing Spider-Man? Well, that's a simple question. No, I do not plan on seeing The Amazing Spider-Man. The only two comic book related movies I plan on seeing this year is The Avengers and The Dark Knight, and I'm more pumped up for The Dark Knight than The Avengers. I'll explain that in my next video, or a future one. My deal with The Amazing Spider-Man is basically for three main reasons. Number one, it's a reboot to a story that we don't need a reboot for. I mean, the first Spider-Man came out only like 10 years ago. I mean, that's not nearly long enough for a reboot. And in my opinion, although 3 was, not that great, in terms of story, I thought it had a pretty good story which connected to Spider-Man's 1 and 2. So why not just continue from that one? If anything, if you can't get Tobey Maguire to come back, then just recast it and continue the storyline. I mean, there were so many possibilities. The fact that they want to go into a storyline that, one, no one knows, and two, nobody really cares about, just doesn't make any sense. I don't like their casting choice. Now, it might be just me, but I've seen a few photographs of him, and it looks like he has Edward's hairstyle from Twilight 1. Now, that alone will prevent me from seeing this movie, because there's no way that hair is going to fit under that mask. I mean, at least Tobey Maguire's hair was kind of down, so it could easily fit under the mask. Number two, I've seen the suit, and it looks stupid. I've never seen any type of suit like that, but there's absolutely no way that somebody from high school, or spending his time in high school, could, sorry about if you can't hear, there's some jets flying around. There's no way someone could make that on his own. I mean, at least in the first one, it was believable, and it was the traditional Spider-Man that we all know and respect. So, yeah. And number three, if you've seen the first trailer to Spider-Man, doesn't it kind of look like it had a Mirror's Edge kind of feel to it? I mean, Mirror's Edge was good and all, but, it was just a little not quite my taste. Now, the only interesting thing I can say towards The Amazing Spider-Man is that they'll have Reptile, which, he's a pretty interesting villain, definitely different from the other ones, but I don't know. I just have a bad feeling about this movie, and so I'm not really going to risk going to see it. And that's really my feelings towards Spider-Man. Next question is from another PSN friend of mine named Jackal1993, and he wants to know my thoughts on how I feel towards Final Fantasy 13 Part 2. Well, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but I'll just say it's got to be one of the dumbest decisions Square has ever made. I mean, I would say it's an even it's an even dumber idea than them wanting to make a third-person shooter using Vincent for Final Fantasy VII. And although that game was kind of a stupid idea, that is so much better than Final Fantasy 13 is. But I'm going to save my rant later on in the month. And on top of that, what's really the point to making a sequel to a bad game? I mean, some really trash on Final Fantasy X-2, but 10-2 had many flaws, but at least it was a sequel to an already amazing game. Instead, they want to make a sequel to a terrible game. I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all. And I've already read articles in which Square is saying that they're already planning on making Final Fantasy 13 Part 3. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. The story is so convoluted and it's so ridiculous. Why would you want to continue it? I mean, what's next? Why don't you just go back and make all the way back to Final Fantasy 1 days on the NES? And why don't you make a sequel to that game? Why don't you make a sequel to Final Fantasy 6? Why don't you make a sequel to Final Fantasy 7? And no, Advent Children, I don't count I mean, technically that's a sequel, but I'm talking about like a sequel with a game. Why don't you just make a sequel to all these past games? Oh, I know why. Because they don't need a damn sequel. Because their storylines were good enough and it had a good ending for the most part. So, I don't know. Maybe this is a money thing. maybe they're just trying to stall Versus release, because Versus is the last Final Fantasy game I will be playing, so in the Final Fantasy series, so I don't know. And I don't know, it just pisses me off, like, because 10 years ago, if you had told me that Square would make 2 of the worst games I would ever play, I would probably say you need to check yourself to a mental hospital, because Square can never make a bad game. I mean, boy, was I wrong. As for 13 Part 2, terrible idea. Why they're doing it, only God knows why. But they need to stop. They need to stop these Final Fantasy games in general. I mean, I can just see it now. 30 years from now, here I'm gonna be sitting in this exact same chair, hopefully not, talking to my kids saying, "Oh, Daddy, why don't you go buy me a Final Fantasy 32?" Like, that's just stupid. They need to just flat out stop with Final Fantasy games. It's amazing how they have all these sequels yet they have nothing in common. And the last question I have from a great friend of mine named W. Cam Case, and he wants to know my feelings towards Final Fantasy X the HD remake. Now, opposite to Final Fantasy 13-2, this is actually an amazing idea, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. Next to 7, I would say that 10 would definitely get the next remake, for sure. Because Final Fantasy X is my personal favorite Final Fantasy above any other ones. So I would definitely like to play that one in HD. Hopefully they add trophies to it. I can get a platinum for that since I am trophy hunting. I currently have more than 4,000 trophies, but I'm currently in a state of retirement until, I don't know, someone encourages me to hit the next level, but that won't be for a while. And yeah, it's really deserves it. My only gripe with it at this point is, they might as well just, why don't they just add both of them on one disc? I mean, as all of us know, for every HD remake they've made, it's never just had one game. I mean, you go back to you think about the first one I can remember, which was, I think was God of War was the first HD collection remake, and then they had God of Wars 1 and 2 on it, and then the next one had God of Wars Ghost of Sparta and Chains of Olympus, and then you had the Shadow of the Colossus HD remake, and that had the game Isos with it, and then you have Devil May Cry coming out in March, and that's going to have all 3 of them. So it doesn't make any sense for them to just put Final Fantasy X on it. You might as well add both of them. I mean, it'd be really easy since they both kind of pretty much have the same graphics level. So yeah, and heck, I mean, heck, since they're gonna be putting it on the Vita, you might as well put as much content on it as you can. So why not just put both games on there? And heck, maybe if you like, maybe you could add the final cut of Final Fantasy X-2, which had like a dungeon level, if I remember correctly. That was incredibly long. But great idea. Can't wait to get it when it comes out this year. Maybe they'll announce that they'll add Part 2 to the disc, and that's about all the questions I've gotten so far. I'm still waiting on more, but as soon as I do, I'll be sure to talk about more of them in my next few videos. So please send me your questions, comment down below, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks for watching.